Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into something I know is really relevant for anyone learning a language. Your feelings, your emotions.
hmm
You shared some great sources looking at how that whole experience feels. The excitement, the frustration.
Exactly. And what's really cool about these sources is they kind of push us beyond just saying, yeah, emotions matter.
Right.
They really dig into how these feelings shift and interact while you're learning, almost in real time.
So we're moving past just looking at, say, how you felt on day one versus how you felt at the end of the course.
Spot on. We're trying to get a more complete picture, not just those emotional snapshots at the start and finish.
Okay, so let's talk about that older way first.
Hmm.
How did researchers traditionally look at emotions in language learning?
Well, often the focus was heavily on anxiety, and it was usually seen as something pretty stable, like a fixed trait.
Uh-huh.
So they might measure your anxiety level at the start, then see how it relates to your final grade or proficiency level way down the line.
Okay, so it's like only seeing the ocean at high tide and low tide.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
Oh.
You miss all the complex fluctuations in between, all the waves and currents.
You miss all the action. So what's the newer perspective? How do we see emotions working now?
The big shift is seeing emotions as constantly in motion. They're not fixed states. They're dynamic processes that unfold as you're engaging with the language.
Hmm.
Think about the last time you tried speaking. Maybe you felt confident talking about something familiar.
Yeah,
But then, bam, someone uses an idiom you don't get, and you feel this wave of anxiety. It's that constant ebb and flow that's key,
that makes total sense.
especially for something as complex as learning another language.
Yeah.
And the research really highlights three critical emotions:
Mm.
anxiety, enjoyment, and boredom.
Oh, yeah. Definitely felt all three of those, sometimes within the same hour.
Right. And they all affect how well you learn and how engaged you feel.
So what causes these feelings to bubble up or change while we're learning?
Well, it's a mix of things.
Mhm.
Partly it's individual, your own personality traits. Some
Mhm.
people are just generally more anxious.
Sure.
But the learning environment is huge. A supportive teacher, that can boost enjoyment, lower anxiety,
Yeah, definitely.
whereas a really critical classroom might do the opposite. And the tasks themselves matter too.
How so?
Well, if a task is engaging, maybe challenging but not too hard, you'll probably enjoy it more.
Right.
But if it's super repetitive or way over your head, that can lead to boredom or anxiety pretty quickly. Even just feeling supported by the teacher makes a big difference.
Yeah, I can totally picture that. Like a dry grammar drill versus actually trying to chat with someone. Very different emotional worlds.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned earlier that older research gave us snapshots. What was it about those methods, questionnaires, surveys that limited them?
Well, those tools are great for getting a general picture.
Mm.
Overall, how anxious do you feel about speaking? Often given maybe at the start and end of a term.
Mm.
Even some studies that followed people over time, longitudinal ones, maybe only checked in, say, once a week or once a month. The sampling rate was pretty low sometimes.
And the problem with that is?
The problem is you miss the rapid-fire changes. That flash of frustration when you forget a word, then the little burst of happiness when it comes back to you.
Oh.
A weekly survey just won't catch that.
It's like trying to understand a movie by only seeing two still photos.
Precisely. You miss the whole dynamic story.
Okay, so we need ways to see the movie. The research mentions complex dynamic systems theory, or CDST.
Hmm.
Sounds technical.
It does sound a bit academic, yeah, but the basic idea is actually pretty straightforward.
Okay, break it down for us.
So CDST basically says that learning a language isn't just stacking up separate skills one by one, like first vocab, then grammar.
Right.
Instead, it's more like a network. All the parts, your words, grammar, pronunciation, even your feelings,
Mhm.
they're all connected and constantly influencing each other, changing together over time.
Everything's linked and evolving.
Exactly. Think of it less like a complicated theory and more like just acknowledging that everything interacts.
Yeah.
The butterfly effect idea.
Sure, small change, big impact somewhere else.
Kind of like that. Small emotional shifts might ripple out and affect your overall learning process in unexpected ways.
Interesting. So how has this CDST idea been used in language learning research so far?
Up to now, it's mostly been applied to look at those bigger, longer-term patterns, like tracking overall progress and proficiency over weeks or months,
Okay.
or looking at how consistent someone's speaking fluency is, or how their writing accuracy changes over time, things like that.
It's tracking trends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There are studies tracking how speaking gets more complex, even if it's not a smooth upward line.
Right.
And others have even looked at how much someone's writing scores vary from one assignment to the next. using that variability to predict how good their writing will be in the end.
Wow, using the ups and downs as a clue. But it still sounds like we're maybe focusing more on the overall journey, not necessarily the emotional roller coaster during the journey.
You've hit on a key point. That's kind of the limitation of how CDST has often been applied in SLA so far.
Okay.
It hasn't fully captured first how all of these different factors, thoughts, social interactions, feelings, the environment, are influencing language use, like right now, moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that they happen at the same time, they actively shape each other in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And second, it hasn't zoomed in much on the dynamics within a single language event, like one conversation or even just saying one sentence.
Got it. More focused on the forest, less on the individual trees interacting.
Sort of, yeah. More on the aggregate changes over time.
Yeah. Okay, so the research we're diving into proposes a new angle on CDST specifically for emotions. What's the main shift in thinking here?
The really crucial idea is to focus on the temporal relationship, the timing. Yeah. Not just if anxiety is related to speaking ability overall, but how a change in anxiety right now is followed by a change in your speaking moments later. Or maybe the other way around.
It's
About that sequence.
the cause and effect unfolding over time. That clicks. The research mentions macro and micro levels of these dynamics.
Right. Think of it like zooming in and out. Macro is the wide shot.
Okay.
Looking at how your emotions evolve over longer periods, across several classes maybe, or a whole semester. Your long-term emotional journey.
And micro.
Micro is the close-up. Focusing on those really rapid shifts in feeling within one single event, like during one presentation you give or one chat you have, even within one sentence sometimes.
Yeah, that granular.
Potentially, yeah. It's that moment-to-moment emotional dance.
And the hypothetical graphs in the research help visualize this. How do they work?
Yeah, they're helpful. Imagine one set showing just average levels, average anxiety, average enjoyment, linked to overall skill. That's the static snapshot.
The before picture.
Kinda, yeah. But the other set of graphs shows those emotions bouncing up and down over time during an activity.
Okay, I can picture that.
You might see enjoyment peak just before you nail a tricky grammar point, then anxiety dips slightly after. By watching that sequence, what happens first, then next we get clues about causality.
Like watching dominoes fall.
Exactly. Much better than just seeing them all standing or all knocked over. You see the process.
So it's not just what you feel, but when you feel it relative to what you're doing linguistically. But you said earlier it's not always simple cause and effect.
No, definitely not. The research calls it a complex web.
Right.
It's rarely just emotion A causes behavior B. Your emotions are interacting constantly with your thoughts, the social situation, who you're talking to, where you are, all sorts of things.
Can you give an example?
Sure, like your anxiety might be tangled up with enjoyment. You feel a bit nervous trying a new phrase,
Mm-hmm.
but then using it successfully gives you this rush of enjoyment. Or maybe how anxious you feel affects how willing you even are to speak up in the first place.
Yeah, that willingness to communicate peace is huge.
It really is. So it's all these factors playing out together dynamically over time.
And this whole dynamic picture must look different for different people, right? The research brings up individual differences, culture.
Absolutely.
Huh?
Hugely important. These emotional patterns aren't going to be one size fits all.
Makes sense.
Someone who's generally confident might have a more positive emotional ride overall. Someone less confident might start with more dips, hopefully changing over time. Even how you see yourself as a learner could evolve.
And culture, how does that fit in?
Well, cultural norms can definitely shape emotional responses. For example, a learner from a culture that really values group harmony might feel more anxious in a very individualistic, competitive classroom setting than someone used to that.
Interesting point, depending on the teaching method used.
Exactly. And research backs this up. People with higher, what they call trait emotional intelligence, basically, being more aware of their emotions, tend to report more positive feelings. And learners who are more autonomous, who take more ownership of their learning, they often enjoy classes more, especially when things get tough.
That tracks.
And we also need to consider neurodiversity. Autistic individuals, for example, might process social and emotional cues differently, leading to unique emotional patterns during language learning.
So recognizing all this variation is key.
It's absolutely crucial. It points towards needing more personalized learning strategies, a bit like how mental health treatment is moving towards dynamic, tailored interventions for individuals.
Okay, so if these emotional shifts are so fast, so personal, how on earth do researchers actually capture them? Those old surveys won't cut it.
Right, that's the million-dollar question. And the research highlights some really neat, innovative methods. One is called the idiodynamic method. It's designed for that micro-level stuff.
Idiodynamic. Okay, new one on me. How does it work?
So the core idea is to track changes within one person during a specific communication event, like a
Mm.
short conversation or presentation.
That-
Typically, you record the event. Then the person watches the recording back fairly soon afterwards.
Okay.
And while they're watching, they continuously rate how they were feeling moment by moment, usually using special software with like sliders or buttons.
So they're indicating, okay, anxiety going up here, enjoyment dipping now as they rewind.
Exactly that. It's like providing a running commentary on their internal state as they relive it.
Wow. What have studies using this method found?
They've shown pretty clearly that feelings like anxiety and enjoyment really do bounce around quite a bit, even within a short task. It's not flat.
Uh-huh.
It's also revealed more complex links between emotions and, say, willingness to communicate. It's not always anxiety high, communication low. Sometimes the desire to overcome anxiety might actually spur someone on.
Interesting. But are there any drawbacks to this idiodynamic approach?
Yeah, there are some potential limitations to be aware of. The act of constantly clicking or moving a slider while watching, that itself is a task.
Right, you're multitasking.
Exactly. It could potentially distract you, maybe introduce slight inaccuracies in the ratings, or even, ironically, increase cognitive load or anxiety a bit.
So the measurement tool itself might affect what's being measured.
It's a possibility researchers need to be mindful of, yeah. Minimizing that interference is important.
The research also mentions possibly linking this with things like EEG brain activity measures. That sounds super high-tech.
It is, and potentially very powerful. EEG could give us a more objective biological signal of emotional processing happening in the brain during language use.
But it's tricky.
The main challenge right now is technical. Getting the timing perfectly synced between the person's subjective report on the slider and their precise brain activity at that exact instant is tough with current software.
Ah, the integration challenge.
Yeah. We need better tools that can seamlessly combine these different data streams, the subjective ratings and the physiological signals. Some existing research software may be adaptable, but it's an area needing development.
Okay, so that's the micro-level zoom lens. What about capturing the bigger picture, those longer-term emotional trends? You mentioned the experience sampling method, ESM.
Right, ESM is great for that macro view. It actually comes from psychiatry originally.
Oh, interesting.
And it's all about collecting data in real time, in people's actual daily lives, not in the lab.
How does it work?
Instead of asking you to remember how you felt last week, ESM uses technology, usually smartphones now, to ping you multiple times a day.
Okay.
And each time, you briefly report on, say, your current mood, what you're doing, who you're with, and crucially, any emotions related to recent language use or learning activities. It's sometimes called ecological momentary assessment, EMA.
So little check-ins throughout your normal day.
Exactly. The big advantage is ecological validity. You're getting data from real-world contexts as things naturally happen.
Not just in the classroom or lab.
Right. Which is great for understanding how emotions fluctuate across different situations and over longer stretches of time in a language learner's life gives a much richer picture.
The research sketched out a hypothetical ESM study during exams. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. Imagine, for 2 weeks leading up to exams, you get maybe 5 or 6 prompts a day on your phone.
Okay.
After any language activity class, studying, chatting, and phone, a prompt asks you to quickly rate your anxiety, enjoyment, boredom right then.
Mm-hmm.
But it might also ask about the context. How tough was that task? How much effort did you put in? Was the environment distracting?
Ah, so you link the emotion to the situation.
Precisely. That contextual information is key. It helps us understand why the emotions might be changing, connecting them to specific experiences, tasks, or settings.
That sounds like it could generate incredibly rich, detailed data about an individual's journey. Any downsides to ESM?
There are practical challenges.
Yeah.
It can be demanding. For participants, getting pinged multiple times a day can feel like a burden.
Yeah, survey fatigue.
Right. So compliance can sometimes be an issue. People might miss prompts or even drop out. Designing it carefully is crucial.
Does it change how people feel, just being asked about it so often?
That's called reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
It's a potential concern, but studies suggest the effect is usually pretty small, especially after the first day or so.
Okay.
And the other thing is data analysis. You end up with lots of data points nested within each person, which requires some specialized statistical techniques to analyze properly.
Speaking of analysis, That brings us to vector autoregression, VAR, another technical
Yeah.
term. What does VAR help us do with this time-based data from ESM or idiodynamics?
So VAR is a statistical technique specifically built for analyzing these kinds of time series data, where you have multiple measurements over time. Its real strength is looking at those temporal relationships, how changes in one thing predict changes in another thing later.
Okay, prediction over time.
Exactly. It's been used quite successfully in emotion research already, but basically lets us model how a whole set of variables at one point in time are influenced by the values of those same variables at earlier time points.
Can you give a simpler example?
Sure. Using VAR, we could see if your anxiety level at, say, 10:00 a.m. predicts your enjoyment level at 10:05 a.m. during a conversation.
Ah, I see.
It can show us both within variable dynamics, like, does feeling anxious now make you more likely to feel anxious 5 minutes from now?
Okay, like inertia.
Kind of. And also, between variable dynamics, does feeling anxious now make you more likely to feel less enjoyment 5 minutes from now?
That's powerful, connecting different feelings over time.
Exactly. Think back to those dynamic graphs. VAR is the tool that can statistically test those patterns we might see visually.
So it could confirm if, for a specific learner, anxiety spikes tend to be followed by enjoyment dips.
Precisely. And that kind of temporal insight is gold for interventions. If we know that pattern exists for someone,
You can target the anxiety before it drags down the enjoyment.
you got it. Maybe suggest some quick calming techniques right before a challenging speaking task based on cognitive behavioral ideas.
Or maybe design activities differently.
Yeah, using ideas from self-determination theory or positive psychology. If we see that feeling competent or connected at one point leads to more enjoyment later, we can focus on building those feelings into the learning design.
This whole dynamic approach just seems to open up so many possibilities. What about the future? The research mentions computational models.
Yeah, that's where things get really exciting. One idea is combining these methods, maybe continuous monitoring of language use, like through wearable tech, synced up with those ESM self-reports.
Whoa, 247 data.
Potentially, yeah. Computational models could then try to bridge the gap between the micro-level fluctuations and the long-term macro development.
And there's more focus now on individual variability.
Yes, definitely. Looking closely at the ups and downs within one person's journey, this means we might be able to do meaningful research even with smaller samples, focusing deeply on individual pathways.
Which leads to more personalization.
Exactly. More personalized language learning, personalized social emotional support, and potentially much earlier, more targeted interventions if someone's heading off track emotionally.
And I guess AI and machine learning play a role here too.
Absolutely. They're becoming essential tools for making sense of these huge, complex, time-based data sets. Machine learning algorithms can detect really subtle patterns in verbal cues, nonverbal behavior, even physiological data, all linked over time. They can then make quite nuanced predictions about future performance or emotional states.
Leading to hyper-personalized learning.
That's the potential, yes. Highly tailored interventions based on real-time analysis of an individual's dynamic state.
Of course, collecting all that personal data, especially speech, raises ethical flags, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a critical consideration. We need minimally invasive methods and very strict ethical guidelines around privacy, data security, and consent. It's a huge responsibility.
And linking the individual patterns to group trends is still a challenge.
Yes, conceptually and methodologically, bridging that intra-individual and inter-individual perspective is still something the field is working on. But the potential synergy between these advanced methods and language learning theory is really transformative.
And finally, just to circle back, the research reminds us not to forget culture in all this.
Yes, super important. Language and culture are inseparable. So how we experience and express emotions, especially in a learning context, is definitely shaped by our cultural background. And viewing this through a dynamic lens adds another layer of complexity.
So cultural sensitivity is key in research and teaching.
Absolutely. We need to understand how these emotional dynamics might play out differently across diverse populations.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive into dynamic emotions in language learning?
I think the main message is shifting our perspective from seeing emotions as fixed things to seeing them as constantly evolving processes gives us a much richer and, frankly, more useful understanding of the language learning journey.
It's about the flow, not just the endpoints.
Exactly. And these newer methods and analyses like the idiodynamic method, ESM, and VAR are giving us the tools to actually see those individual emotional flows.
It certainly makes me reflect on my own language learning ups and downs differently.
Yeah, and that leads perfectly into our final thought for you, the listener. Take a moment to consider your own emotional fluctuations during language learning. When do you feel enjoyment peak? When does frustration or anxiety creep in? What might those patterns, if you track them over time, tell you about your unique learning process and maybe even how you could tweak things to make it work better for you?
Food for thought. Looking at the journey through that dynamic lens.
Exactly. See
Yeah.
what new insights pop up.